Everyone, please take your seats. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Abad Khan, and I'm the current president of the Halifax Ndp. Thanks. Should reserve your applause for the honored guest. A couple quick notes. There are washrooms outside these doors to your right. The closest gender-neutral washrooms are located upstairs and downstairs in the same location. So, and we're also pleased to welcome Shane LeBlanc and Amanda Noyes, who will be our American Sign Language interpreters for this evening. You may also notice there's a small camera there. We'll be live streaming this event, or at least streaming it in delay, and the camera is only going to be focused on stage. I wanted to extend a gracious thank you to our community partners, CKDU-FM. I don't know if Daryl Smith is in the room somewhere. He may be outside working. We're fortunate to have a community campus radio station that makes it their mission to showcase and amplify diverse voices, music, and news. Please tune in to 88.1 FM and support them however you can. I also wanted to give a quick thank you to all of our volunteers tonight and every other day of the week that I email and other folks email you to do the work of the riding in the NDP. We couldn't do any of this without you, so thank you. It is now my distinct pleasure to welcome Trevor Sanipass to the stage. Trevor Sanipass is a Mi'kmaq First Nations belonging to a community called Eskasoni, but currently resides in Lower Sackville, Nova Scotia. He is a direct descendant of the last hereditary Grand Chief, John Denny Jr. Trevor is currently employed with the Nova Scotia Department of Justice Correctional Services as a probation officer. He is a motivational speaker, a champion of diversity, and a role model for youth and for Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people. If you could please welcome him. Thank you.
Thank you, Waladio. So this is what I'm going to do. My name is Trevor Sanipass. I'm going to speak in Mi'kmaq, my first language, and I'm going to translate into English. So here you go. Gwe, which is hi. Ni Dalhousie Trevor Sanipass. Ani na ilnu gliawi ilnu egadi Dalhousie Eskasoni. La na ilnu egadi mauki ilnu egadi la Dalhousie meg la gisku Mi'kmaqi. Eskamiya Dalhousie ignu wad lo ko in Mi'kmaqi. Iru wad lo dami wedebexi. Nuchinenona John Denny Jr. Gisama on a negamola dandilki ilnu egadi. And the Dalhousie mo gisku Mi'kmaqi. Giduganawadi, Diljuwildasi, La Willag, Aim, Bijiganawadi, La Gina, Meganalaji, NDP, Dalhousie JagMeet Singh. Boxy be Iglamsida, Negan Glusawanum, not Diljuwildasi, Aim, La Willag. And then wait, but Giduganawadi lot, and Diljuwildasi, Aim. Yella Mi'kmaqi. So Mi'kmaqi, na La Ilnuegadi, La Sa, Unu, Mamigo Moe, La Ilnuegadi, La Mamigo, Mina, Iganu Medimidi. Namsik Doodleway, Waldasi, Chilida, Mi'kmaqi, Norma, Ladio. Thank you. Of course, I'll translate. So hi, my name is Trevor Sanipass. I am Mi'kmaq, belonging to a community called Eskasoni. I like the word belonging. A community called Eskasoni. It's the largest Mi'kmaq community in the Atlantic province. It is located in the beautiful, beautiful Cape Breton. I want to acknowledge and mention my great-great-grandfather, John Denny Jr. He passed on 1918, April 12 of 1918, so his 100-year anniversary is coming up next week. So he was the last hereditary Grand Chief, so I just want to mention his name. I'm up here extremely, actually honored and proud to welcome you all, everyone, and especially to the leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, to our territory, Mi'kmaqi. But before I explain what Mi'kmaqi is, and again, I'm so honored when I was asked to do the land acknowledgement. I was like, yes, like, of course. I totally respect and love this individual. And I find that some of his views kind of aligns really well with my teaching. So I said, yes, absolutely. I totally love and respect this person. So I said, yes, thank you. So Mi'kma'ki, I'm here to do the land acknowledgement. So Mi'kma'ki, we are here in Mi'kma'ki, where my ancestors roamed or inhabited these lands, the land that we never have, we never gave up. We never surrendered this land. So I want to welcome you to Mi'kma'ki, the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. Walalio. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce you to the host of this evening. Alia Saied is a second-generation settler of Palestinian and Lebanese descent who grew up on the beautiful South Shore of Nova Scotia. She's an active community activist and facilitator, has been involved with a variety of social and environmental justice-centered projects and campaigns in Nova Scotia. She believes there is always space for laughter and cookies in our movements. Love that. In her spare time, Alia serves as a DJ, doula, and justice of peace. Please welcome Alia.
Okay. Thank you, Trevor. I guess this isn't my mic, but maybe I'll move in a second. Good evening and welcome. Good evening. Good evening. Yay, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. It's a nice, crisp spring day. It's also an honor to introduce you to Jagmeet Singh, someone who brings hope for me, at least, for the future of politics in this country. So I hope you feel similarly. I'll get right into his bio, I'll tell you a bit about him, and then we'll invite him to the stage, and we'll have an interesting, dynamic conversation. We'll have some community questions, and then we'll have a meet and greet. So I hope that sounds good to people? Yep, yep, yep. All right. So Jagmeet was born in Scarborough, Ontario. He spent some time here on the East Coast living in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and he grew up in Windsor, Ontario. He was first elected as the member of the provincial parliament for the riding of Bramley Gore Malton in 2011, re-elected in 2014, and served as both the deputy House leader and later deputy leader of the Ontario NDP from 2015 to 2017. As a provincial member of parliament, Jagmeet was a leader in the fight to tackle economic and systemic injustices like preventing exploitation by auto insurance companies, ensuring stronger protections for for workers employed by temporary job agencies, and pushing the Ontario government to end the practice of arbitrary street checks or carding by police. So as a leader of Canada's NDP, Jagmeet is attacking some of the most challenging issues of our time: inequality, electoral reform, Indigenous reconciliation, and climate change, to build a Canada where no one is left behind. And I think, if you're here, hopefully you feel similarly, that we'll all be on that wave where everyone can get in and get on. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jagmeet Singh to the stage. Here's your mic.
Cool.
And let's go have a seat.
Yay.
Yay. Any students here, aren't you entering exams, right? Yeah, I see a lot of head nods. Yeah, we all know what that's like. It's, you get tired. Thanks for coming. So it's great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
How's that ocean air?
I love that salt-kissed air. Anytime. Love it.
It has a certain, sometimes a certain bite. Sometimes we all know that sometimes there's a little odor. It's kind of nice. It really wakes you up. So anyway,
I love it.
It's great to have you back.
It's the air of my childhood.
Yeah, that's right. It makes your lungs strong. So this is your second visit since leader and fourth or fifth since leadership campaign.
That's right. I've been out to the Atlantic provinces a lot. I've also learned the distinction between, say, Maritimes and Atlantic provinces. Growing up in Newfoundland and Labrador, I have to, otherwise I'd be in a lot of trouble. So yes,
good.
Love it out here.
Great to have you back. For you.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I guess for everyone who's involved in politics or who gets involved, even if you just watch politics from home and you're passionate about it, you have a story or a spark, something that really, something really hard. I want to keep going. I want to know what's going to happen next. I want to be involved. I think my voice is important. So I'd love to know how you can experiencing in school or some of your stuff around law. Was it that shaped you, or was it something more, or maybe not? I don't know.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to answer that. So my actual story of how I literally got into politics is going to be a little bit anticlimactic, I'll tell you that. But I'll tell you the reason why I care, which I think is the bigger, I guess maybe more touching story. And the reason why I care is, sure, I faced some struggles growing up, a lot of us have. Sure, I faced some bullying because of the way I looked. Again, a lot of folks felt that way and have experienced that, which is rough and sad. And that made me sensitive to unfairness. So I started noticing it around me, and I really noticed that I wasn't alone, that so many people face unfairness in their lives and injustice. So that got me ready to care. And really, I give a lot of credit to my mom. My mom is pretty much who made me who I am. And she taught me this thing that really is the foundation for why I care about to tackling inequality. She said to me again and again as a kid that we're all one, that we're all connected. And it sounded super hippie to me. And I was kind of like, what? Like, what does it mean we're all one? Like, it's kind of a hard concept to grasp. And I would kind of question it a bit. I'd be like, well, like, we look different and we like speak different languages, come from different places. How are we all one? And she would say, despite all of that, and in fact, we should celebrate that, but underneath those kind of superficial differences, really we share far more in common than that which separates us. There's something that links us together, that unites us. And as I got older, I really believed that that's so, so true. We are really all in this together. And all of our struggles, we're united by them. And when we see people around us suffering, we're also suffering. And she kept on telling me that idea, and I really believe it's true. And when we lift up the people around us, we all rise together. There's no question about it. So that was really the foundation for why I care. And then the reason why I got into politics, I'll tell you the story. It's not that exciting. When kids, when I go to like schools and young people ask me like, how'd you get into politics? I'm like, why don't you guess? And they say all sorts of cool reasons, like, because you wanted to change the world. I'm like, oh, it's a great reason, but no, not that one. They're like, because you wanted to make a difference. I'm like, oh, that's a really good reason too. No, that wasn't the reason. The reason why I got into it was really a lot of peer pressure, if I'm honest. Which again, like I said, it's not very, it's a little anticlimactic. I was working as an activist, as a student, and then as a law student, and then as a lawyer. I would support those same activist groups. So we were groups tackling poverty. So groups that were fighting against poverty, groups that were fighting for marginalized people, tackling issues around immigrants and refugee. There was groups that were talking about the rights of students and tackling high tuition fees. So all these groups, anti-poverty, immigrant rights, and student tuition groups, I was supporting them, and some other groups dealing with human rights issues, and they felt like they didn't have a voice at the table when it came to government. And as an activist, I was like, yeah, we need a voice, but it's not going to be me, because I'm an activist. I'm going to fight the government, fight the man. I don't want to become one of them. So I resisted it for a while. I was really cynical about it. But eventually, the folks around me really encouraged me, used lots of great tactics to encourage me, which involved some guilt tripping. And then finally, I caved to the pressure and said, fine, let's do it. And then after I got into it, I realized this is an incredibly rewarding line of work where I can not only give back so much, but I can also learn so much from the experience. So I think in life, if you can find something that gives you that sense of giving back and helping those around you, but also personal growth, you found something that's really, so what I found.
Great. Well, I love that, and I'm glad that you did it, and I'm glad that your friends supported you in your decision,
I've got to come up with a more politically correct way of saying it.
Than you're peer pressured or whatever. That's really interesting. I think for work ways, like your parents do shape you, they do encourage your worldview, and for me, my parents are quite nervous about politics, but always the same, told me like this concept of like everyone has the same rights. You treat someone like you want to be treated, and I think that it's an important lesson. I think most people can identify that you want to be treated fairly and you want to be treated with care from people, and it's something that leads us. So, talking more about your family and your parents, and I know that you've mentioned how important your mom is and how your community has shaped your worldview. So as someone who seems like a faith-following person, can you tell us more about how that's led you on the path you're on, and this concept of Chardi Kala?
Oh, yeah, totally.
That I've learned a little bit about and would love to know more about because it sounds joyful.
Yeah, it's totally cool. So again, this is another mom story. So my spiritual beliefs are also kind of tie into the same idea that we're all connected, that we're not just connected to one another, but we're also connected to the planet, so that when we harm the planet, we're harming ourselves. And that's a big part of why I believe we've got a fundamental responsibility to tackle climate change, to protect our environment, yes, shout outs to that. Yes. So that's a part of those beliefs. So the Chardi Kala is, I've talked about this a lot. Folks that are my 44 incredible MPs, some of them have learned this word. So I was with the 44 MPs, and I might have seemed a bit down, I guess, in the meeting. And one of my MPs said to me, Jagmeet, I think you need some charity kala. I'm like, so he's and what it is if you ever ask her how she's doing, I say, hey mom. If you say, hey mom, you too. Hey, as like a studious son, I wanted to learn from what my mom taught me. So she asked me one day, how are you doing? And I said, really confidently, I'm going to use a word that I heard today, right? I'm thinking, I'm feeling in Chardi Kala too. And then she's like, why?
Uh-oh.
It was that uh-oh moment. I'm like, oh man, it's one of those like, did you learn though? Did you learn the lessons? Or are you just repeating it? And then I was like really nervous, and I said, because sometimes moms can stare at you that way, intimidated, right? As much as I'm like a confident person, moms can get you a little unsettled because they wanted you to learn. So I said, well, because it's outside, and I'm feeling like in good, and I'm feeling healthy. That's why I'm in Chardi Kala. And she looks at me. That's not Chardi Kala. I'm like, oh man, I got it wrong. I'm like, okay, fine, mom, what is it? And she said, Chardi Kala is courageous rising spirits when things aren't going well, when the odds are against you, when times are tough, when it's not sunny outside, but maybe it's raining or a bit cold. And you still tap into a courageous desire for improvement and fighting for a better world, a spirit of betterment. And that's truly rising spirits. I'm like, whoa, that's deep. But it's true. I think in a lot of the work we do as progressives, as people who want to build a better community, a fairer community, sometimes it's a tough battle. Sometimes it's pretty frustrating because we're up against some difficult odds. And I think a lot of us have to tap into that courageous optimism in the face of hopeless odds sometimes. And I think that's really the testament of why we're able to, and we will be able to win in the struggles for building a fairer world, is when we tap into that courageous sense of deserving and desiring a better world.
Lovely. That's like way deeper than I even thought. I was like, I understood the concept of like maybe a bright spirit or feeling good, but that is a real lesson that I will take too. So tonight, as you know, our community partner is CKDU, and CKDU is awesome. So for all the students and community members in the room, you can have a radio show here. I'm just going to say that, and it's really, and I didn't take advantage of the student, and I regret it. So anyway.
Shout out.
So CKDU is Halifax's only campus community radio station, and that's really important because they have shows like, I can list them because I listen, Black Power, Arabic Voice, The Outer Edge, Smooth Grooves, Voice of Eritrea, Democracy Now! Every day at noon. If you don't know, 88.1 FM. See, this is I'm like, if I could talk about CKDU, I probably would for the whole time, so I won't. So their mandate is to be a forum for diverse and underrepresented voices, music, and news in Halifax and on campus. So can you expand, I guess, on the importance of local media and community stations like CKDU?
Yeah, I think it's so powerfully important that people have a platform to share their ideas, and particularly when there's voices that are often sidelined or marginalized, people who don't have a place or a space to share their thoughts and ideas. I think it's powerfully important to have that platform and that venue to be able to have the discussions and the difficult conversations. So community radio, community spaces in general to organize. I was at a library earlier today in, I can't remember the neighborhood right now, but it was a hub. Basically, it was not just a library, it was a center for people coming together to be able to organize. And many of the great organizations that now do good work in Halifax were started and began in that community hub. So similarly, when you have
The North Branch Library.
thank you,
That's right.
thank you. The North Branch.
That's right.
That's right. We were there together.
That's
Shout
right.
outs to one of our champions. Remind me, restaurant slash. Shout outs right in the front row. Does great work in the community.
Michelle Strum.
Yes, of course. Michelle is amazing. Whoop, whoop. Yeah, so I think it's super important to have those spaces, particularly for local communities and local, especially student-based, like coming out of a university, it's a great place to have people organizing.
So go get a show. Everyone can get a show. It's really easy. It's really fun. I can't say it enough. So I'll stop saying it. So, I mean, I guess we'll go into a little bit more of maybe a broader subject that affects us all. As you know, there are probably a lot of strong feelings in this room this evening about healthcare. So Nova Scotia is in the midst of a healthcare crisis. We're all hearing this every day on the news, and if you're not hearing it, you might have to turn the radio up a little bit, but, you know, our largest tertiary hospital is crumbling. There's no infrastructure money coming from the federal government. Doctors and nurses are leaving our province or publicly coming out and saying, like, I have to come out of retirement because I feel bad. There's no one here to serve my community. I'm overworked. I can't do it anymore. Hallway medicine is a familiar story that we're hearing constantly about people who are having these emergencies and being treated in the hallway. And, you know, so as much as the Liberal Party may, you know, they can make lots of noise about things and positive noise, negative noise. You know, they've signed on to the same funding formula as Conservatives, and I'd love to know. And I know that you've got a plan. So I'd love to know what the NDP government would do differently to help us address, especially the Atlantic provinces. You know, what's going on for our healthcare? Sure.
So on healthcare, I really want to frame the discussion in a certain way. And I actually, can be honest with you, I didn't really think about it. I thought, you know, healthcare is important. Access to our universal healthcare system is something that I really am proud of as a Canadian, but I didn't really think about the origins of it a lot. And it was only until, name drop, I spoke with Bernie Sanders last fall. Shout out to Bernie, he's a great guy. He came up to do a talk on his plan, which is Medicare for all in the States. And when I was chatting with him, he reminded me actually why we're doing this, why healthcare matters. What he said was, in the States, when people fall ill, they obviously can't work, because if you get really sick, it's hard to work, and then you can't afford the medication or the health care that you need to get better. So people get into worse and worse situations. And he was pointing out that one of the major causes for bankruptcy in people's lives is when people get ill and they can't afford the health care. I see. Reminded me, that's exactly why healthcare started here, universal healthcare started in Canada. That was the same scenario. People would lose their health and lose all their resources as well. And so universal healthcare wasn't just a great social program, inequality. The idea being that everyone should have access to healthcare regardless of how much someone earns, and that when everyone has access to this important service, it actually lifts up people all around us. Fund it can either start it and make it more powerful inequality, or if we as a society choose not to fund it, it actually crumbles and no longer acts as that important equalizing tool, that tool of lifting people up. And so I believe firmly we need to not only invest in it, a program and that means reversing the trend of decades and decades of cuts to federal funds going to provinces, and that's part of the reason why healthcare is crumbling, because we've not funded it appropriately. So we need to fund it. That's a first step. But not only do we need to defend it and invest in it, we also need to look at expanding it. Expanding healthcare will also reduce costs. So one of the first steps, the fundamental steps that makes so much sense, and it's offensive to me that we haven't actually implemented this yet. We're the only country in the world that has universal health care but doesn't have universal pharmacare. We know that in Canada, a report came out of UBC just a couple months ago showing that millions of Canadians can't access the medication they need, and it's often seniors. And we know it makes no sense if you can't access medication, because what happens is when someone's ill and they can't get the medication they need, naturally what happens, they get more sick. And when someone gets more and more ill, then they eventually need emergency medical intervention, which is so costly. But we need to look beyond that too. So we need to immediately implement pharmacare, and that's a first step. Absolutely. We need to look beyond and say, well, when we implement pharmacare, why is it that our healthcare stops at our teeth? Last time I checked, if you don't have good dental health, then that definitely is going to impact your overall health. So we should look at dental care as a part of our universal health care. We should look at eye care and mental health supports to truly complete the. A lot of views on how.
So we're rounding out to the end of our questions. So
Sure.
I'm going to talk about a bit of a sad time. So in 2015, we lost our NDP MPs. So we lost Megan Leslie and we lost Jack Harris and our, our progressive kind of presence that had been here for a long time to the Liberal red wave. And I found it quite sad, to be honest. So currently, all 32 MPs representing Atlantic Canada are in Ottawa, are Liberal, meaning that our region has no voice, really, in opposition to the government. If they're Liberal, they're staying in government. So many times we've seen the left, right, tell people they're going, things like electoral reform. Make these promises, we're gonna start, and it fades away, or oh, we can't, or actually things are fine, so we're just going to leave it as they are, and it's a broken promise. So I think at least for me and the people around me, there's a yearning and a desire for progressive representation, not only in Halifax, but in the Atlantic provinces, in Nova Scotia. And I'd like to hear more about, what issues have you been hearing about while you're here, and what do you think the NDP needs to do to be politically relevant here, and how, why does it matter to elect an NDP MP, or many NDP MPs in Atlantic Canada and the Maritime provinces?
Sure. Well, a part of that's a big part of how we can make that, we can do the outreach so that we can speak to folks. But why it matters, what happens, I find, in politics is that, so I can speak to it on a personal level, I was quite cynical about politics. And the reason I was cynical is I thought there's no way that people in positions of power or governments are going to do what's needed. I didn't feel like they were there to actually help people out. It seemed like they were always putting up barriers or roadblocks to actually getting things done. I'm like, I can't believe them, I don't trust them. And I realized, when you think about it, that when governments don't follow through on their commitments, things like electoral reform is a powerful example. One might think, okay, it's not something that I wake up and think of every morning. It's not like, maybe some people do, but it's not like most people wake up and think, hey, electoral reform, we need that. But when you don't see a government implement something, it feeds that cynicism. And then what happens when people are cynical, they don't participate. And then when people don't participate, the status quo remains. And so cynicism benefits the status quo. It benefits things staying exactly how they are and not improving. And I think we don't believe, I think all of us in this room can agree, this is not as good as it gets. Not as good as it gets. We can do better and we must do better. And in fact, our government all this around us. It's ours. And we not only shouldn't just expect it, we should demand that our governments implement the dreams that we want to see happen. We should demand that. And what we've seen is there's been this revolving door federally, blue team, red team, and it's kind of been status quo. Some moments of positive steps forward, but then a lot of just status quo. And I don't think we can afford the status quo anymore. Ipsos survey said that the majority of Canadians, like 51% of Canadians, feel like they're just $200 away from being able to pay their bills. And that means they're going to lose it all. They're just $200 away from it. That was the majority of Canadians feel that way. Inequality is growing. We're seeing massive inequality. And all that's going to remain the same if we continue to support the status quo kind of parties and the status quo sort of policies. We need to boldly tack in a direction that's going to benefit all Canadians. That means trade deals are not focused on free trade, but are focused on fair trade that benefit Canadians. That means making sure we have a tax system that ensures that everyone contributes fairly and that there isn't a separate tax system for the ultra-wealthy who can use tax havens or loopholes to not contribute back to society. It means talking about taxes like investments. You wouldn't talk about reducing your investment into Canada because we want to invest more and to build a better society, invest more. I think that there's a certain group of folks that have turned the agenda and made it sound like the word tax is like a four-letter word. It's not. It's contributions for all of us together. We often, as friends, get together and pool our money to buy maybe some food for a party or for a pizza. It's the same way. We pool our resources so we can build something good for all of us that we can all enjoy. It's something that we contribute to build up a better world. So in the Atlantic provinces, we're seeing that without a strong voice to push the government, to hold them to account, we're seeing the government is not being held to account. And in fact, promises that were made are being broken, commitments are not being followed through on. We're seeing that one of the biggest things that we heard about was the environment. Again and again, the government talked about we're going to tackle climate change and we're going to protect the environment. Then the Environmental Commissioner came out just, I think, a week or 2 weeks after I became leader, saying that definitely, without a doubt, this government has not taken any action on climate change. They've not actually taken any concrete steps to reducing reducing emissions. The problems that we're faced with. And that was the Environmental Commissioner, independent officer of Parliament. So there's a lot of stuff that we need to do, and we can't do it unless we've got the people that are bold enough to implement the changes that we all want to see happen. And this can't happen with just electing individuals. It's going to happen. All of you in this room are a team of people who believe in a brighter future, and our brighter future is only possible if the team.
Jump into the question period. So we're going to take probably 2 to 3 questions at a time, probably 3 questions at a time. And so, I mean, we'll go forward from that. We might not get to everyone. There are a lot of people in the room, but we'll try. And then afterwards, you'll have a chance to, mix and mingle, have a chat. So again, yeah, feel free to put your hands up. We have people going around with the mics. They can hold the mic up for you for your question. And I just encourage you to, to ask some good questions. So, all right, we've got some hands going up. So do you want to, we'll go, I think we're going to start over here. We'll go 1, 2, 3, and then we'll go over here. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead.
Hi. So 50 of the 51 members of the Nova Scotia legislature, the majority of them are men. And of the 51, there's very few, like 2 or 3 members that are visible minorities. So how do we increase representation on our legislature that's supposed to, represent us?
Great. Okay, we'll go to the next question. Do you want a pen and paper?
I am getting it.
Someone's bringing you pen and paper. Okay, here we go. Here, and you can use my.
Got it.
Oh, you have that. Okay.
Keep them coming.
Okay, welcome. I'm wondering what citizen research would be of benefit to you? Thank you.
That's a good question. All right, and then you had one more person here in the middle.
I don't think the NDP is getting treated fairly in the press, and I really would like you, Jagmeet, to comment on how can I say this? With so much conflict between two provinces who are NDP and some major issues where there's conflict, I find that it's very hard to know where we stand because the Liberals seem to be wanting to out-NDP us. So there seems to be a kind of vacuum right now. Well, it's in the press. I don't know if it's real or not, but I'd like you to comment on that, please.
Thank you. All right, you want to start with those three, and then we'll go to
Sure.
the other side of the room?
Yep.
All right, take it away.
All right, thank you very much. So the first question, how do we develop or create a more reflective parliament, or parliament that better reflects our society? I think we've got to just name things for what they are. The first, I think the biggest problem, and it's sometimes hard to come out with something and say very clearly what the biggest problem is, but I think without a doubt, the biggest problem is the underrepresentation of women, without a doubt. In parliament, that's something, and in elected positions, half of our population, women, and if you look at any parliament, whether it's municipal level, or if you look at any level of government, whether it's municipal level, provincial, or federal, that's probably one of the biggest underrepresentations. I don't know if you can say big and under, but you know what I mean. It's a massive problem. I think one of the solutions is proportional representation. We see where proportional representation is implemented, it increases the representation of women. It increases the representation of racialized or equity-seeking members. And that could be based on any form, any identity, whether it's gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity. So I think those are some powerful ways. As leader of a party, I'm committed to making sure that we recruit and have members from equity-seeking groups in ridings that are winnable. And so I'm working really hard on doing that. I think there's a number of other strategies. We can look to other countries and jurisdictions where they've solved this and done a better job. I think some of the work has to be in making sure the candidate selection process is one that encourages diversity, so that at the candidate selection stage, we actually have a diverse and proportional candidates kind of group, and then from there, it's easier to then elect a proportional parliament that way. So I think that those are some of the steps, but there's a lot of work we need to do on that. That's a massive failure, I think, in our democracy. Citizen research, I think there's a lot of areas where we could benefit from citizen research. We were just talking earlier, there's been so much work done on framing the discussion around taxation in the frame of it's always better to cut taxes. Like, that's always the frame. And I think getting strong research to show that doesn't build a fair society. And then, in fact, we know this, but more research on this, that fair taxation, where people fairly contribute to our mutual benefit, actually results in better societies, more robust societies where everyone benefits. I think it's also important to have research that, we know this is true, but we need more research to point out in societies where there's more inequality, it's actually those societies in general are where there's less civic engagement, people are less happy, people are less safe. So there's a benefit for everyone to build a more equal society where there's less inequality. So I think maybe those two pieces, taxation and how a society that's based on inequality or where there's growing inequality, those are societies that are just not as good as societies that are more equal. I think that would be really useful research. And the NDP, British Columbia and Alberta conflict. That is probably the question that comes out the most often in meet and greets and in media. This is the way I approach that question. I went out and campaigned in Alberta during the Alberta election and supported Premier Notley and her team, the Motley Crew. This was pretty catchy, I thought. Folks that listen to Motley Crue, yeah. And let's be honest, what Premier Notley and her team have done in a short period of time has been pretty incredible. At a time where the Conservatives were running on an agenda of slashing, cutting services in education and in healthcare, the New Democrats came in and actually stopped those cuts. They froze tuition fees, increased minimum wage, put in working protections for farm workers, did a whole host of pretty incredibly progressive things, ended corporate donations, put forward the most aggressive climate change plan in the country, did a lot of good work. And Premier Notley promised to defend the interests of Alberta, so she's doing what she promised to do. Premier Horgan also committed to doing what was best for the people of British Columbia, which meant protecting the environment, protecting the coast, and he's been doing that with some really progressive policies around housing and tackling the housing crisis in British Columbia, which is a crisis across Canada, but we see a lot of the biggest impacts in some of those urban centers. So they've done a lot of great work, and he's following through on his commitment. And so in this debate, I think the media kind of wants me to weigh in on the Alberta versus BC. I think for us, it's better to say, listen, both of them are doing exactly what they promised they would do. But who broke their promise? It's the federal government. The federal government promised to put in a new environmental assessment process. They promised that because they knew that the previous system was widely considered a sham. It was a process that the Harper administration brought in that did not allow for any testimony on the impacts to the environment for energy projects, didn't allow for testimony on things like how would the coast be impacted by an oil spill when the pipeline is delivering diluted bitumen, which is a more difficult type of oil to clean up. None of the environmental concerns that folks had were addressed. Indigenous communities weren't allowed to come forward and raise their concerns. So we are where we are right now, not because of Premier Notley or because of Premier Horgan, but because the Prime Minister failed to follow through on his commitment to have a renewed process that was independent, science-based, that allowed folks to have their concerns addressed. And in the absence of that, people are upset and are really worried about whether the coastal areas will be protected or whether they will be at serious risk because of this project. That's a legitimate concern, and that's why I've said I'm opposed to the project, because those concerns were not addressed. I think that's why we've got to focus in on who's responsible. Whenever there's a provincial disagreement, it's the federal government's role, and in this case, the federal government failed to fulfill their responsibility, and that's where we need to focus our energies.
Thank you. So I think Charlie is going to give us the next three questions.
Hi, I'm half Cree, and as an Indigenous woman, I've had people in my immediate family be failed by the mental health capabilities on various reserves. I think our government has really failed its Indigenous people in bringing forward more mental health services on reserves, as well as in terms of mental health care, as well as health care itself. How would you plan on tackling the boil water advisories on many different Indigenous reserves, as well as the current mental health crises that many places are undergoing currently?
That's a good question. That's a really good question.
Can I take this? Sure. Okay. Hi, I'm a member of the NDP. It's the very first thing I did when I actually immigrated to Canada. I'm from the United States, and I believe in the NDP, and I think we really are the conscience of Canada. And I have a question about David Christopherson, who is an amazing MP who recently spoke out of the party line in Parliament, who you unfortunately reprimanded harshly enough that your entire caucus seemed to kind of back him up and go against you. So I'm just wondering what you can say in response to that to make me not just think that you're a party leader following the motions, but what are you doing that's making you the next Prime Minister of Canada when stuff like that happens?
All right, third question.
Next question was, I think
this fellow. Oh, yeah.
Earlier today, I think you held an event about carding or street checks, and I was just wondering how you think we could get the Nova Scotia government to do something about that issue.
All right, so we'll go with those three questions.
Totally. So the first question, I think we've got to be really honest with ourselves. Canada has, without a doubt, failed in many ways with respect to ensuring that Indigenous peoples have their sovereignty, their rights, and the services that they deserve, there's been massive failure. And when I talk about inequality, I think there's no more stark example of inequality than if you look at the lack of services, access to resources that Indigenous people suffer in our country. There's no question about it. And what's really shameful is the fact that though the current budget has put in place, and I can acknowledge that this is a positive step, but I'll explain why it's shameful. The government put forward in the recent budget funding to address the concern or the gap in funding for Indigenous child welfare, for First Nations child welfare. So that was something that was done, which is a positive thing. But it's shameful that it took 4 orders from the Human Rights Tribunal of Canada, 4 orders that said that this must be done, and the government ignored 4 orders before putting it into the budget. This is an example of the problem that exists in our country, that Indigenous people were asking for a fair share, which they are absolutely entitled to. They shouldn't have to go to a tribunal, have the tribunal rule in their favor 4 times before the government listens. We need to be proactive and address the inequality without having Indigenous communities need to go to court. That's the starting point. When it comes to mental health services, I think there's a gap across Canada, and we're seeing that. It's more and more of a prevalent issue. There's a lot of stigma around people coming forward and trying to get those services, and that is only further exacerbated when it comes to reserves and Indigenous communities. So it's already a gap, and that's only that much worse when it comes to communities that are already marginalized. So it's definitely a gap. How we would address it is make it a priority. We've got to fund the priorities that we have to be matched up with funding. And so whether it's mental health or ending the boil-water advisory, it's not going to happen unless steps are taken and unless funding is prioritized for that. It's something that we have to do. It's something that as New Democrats and as a leader I'm committed to doing, and something we've got to do not just because it's the right thing to do for the Indigenous communities, the first people of this land, but something that we can all then look at our country as a just country when the first people of this land are able to live in dignity and respect. And this question is coming up a lot these days because it's recent news. So the question on Dave Christopherson. At the end of the day, I'll give it some context. There was debate around the Canada Summer Jobs Program, and the debate around that started to develop into a question of whether or not people should question the right, or whether it became a debate around women's right to choose and LGBTQ communities. And that became kind of the focus of this debate. And I wanted to be very clear, as New Democrats, we are firmly in favor of women's right to choose, that we firmly defend women's rights, and that we firmly defend the LGBTQ community's rights. So that was something very important for me to send as a message. This bill, the motion itself was a political motion. The goal of it was to wedge and to divide, and the purpose of it being brought by the Conservatives was they were challenging this notion of the rights to choose and the rights of LGBTQ community. So reading into the politics of it, I wanted us to be on the right side of it, and I wanted to be clear where we stood. That's where I stand. I'm firmly in defense of women's rights and firmly in defense of all minority communities, including the LGBTQ community. So that's the context. But I can also tell you, as a leader, I'm not arrogant in thinking that I always get it right. I don't believe that I always have the right answer, and I'm not afraid to revisit a decision that I made. I'm proud that I'm able to do that anytime. I don't think it's any sign of weakness to say, hey, maybe I got that decision wrong and I need to come up with a better decision. Maybe I need to reflect on it more. And so that's the type of leader I am. I'm not the type of leader. Other leaders might shout down their caucus members and might try to bully them or might try to coerce them to a certain direction. I believe in listening to people. I'm not afraid to do that. And in the future, let me give you a disclaimer. I might change my decision on something in the future because I don't think it's something wrong to do. If there's the right evidence for it, if there's the right arguments for it, I think it's important to be able to be open. I will also stand firm on things that I believe in and not back down. And so you'll see both of those, and that's the type of leader I am. And And the final one, this is really important to me because it's something that I've experienced kind of on both sides. Experienced being stopped by the police just as a kid growing up, even as a law student, I was stopped a number of times, and I've shared some of those stories. And when you're stopped in your own community, having committed no offense, not under being an investigation for any specific, criteria or any evidence, just being stopped and then being asked for identification and seeing that information being written down really makes you feel like there's something wrong with you. Like you just can't be in your own community, that there's something wrong with you for being you. And so I know how much that hurts, having experienced it. And I experienced it as a law student most recently. And I had the knowledge of the law to kind of inform myself. Imagine if I wasn't a law student that didn't have friends that were lawyers or professors that I could reach out to for help. And imagine I didn't have the same resources. I could just only imagine how much more scary and intimidating those experiences would have been. And so it's something we need to stop. And we can. We've got a charter that makes it really clear. People should be free from arbitrary detention. People should be free from unreasonable search and seizure. We've got laws that should protect us from these interactions. And I also want to make it clear, the police do important work. We don't deny the important work of police keeping our communities safe. But police detention or stop should be based on objective criteria. And when police chiefs push back and say, we need to street check, I say, if you are stopping someone solely because of the color of their skin, there's no way you can justify that. There's no way that that's right. There's got to be objective criteria, some sort of evidence to base the reason for the stop. And so what we can do here in Nova Scotia, I know it's a big issue. Well, you've got some incredible folks at the provincial level that are actually going to table a bill tomorrow calling for a moratorium on street checks until the report of the Human Rights Commissioner comes forward showing that this is not appropriate, which we kind of already know. But yeah, shout outs to the NDP here in Nova Scotia. We're going to table that bill, and we're expecting to get some support for that. We talked about it today in that joint kind of press conference. Powerful initiative led by the province and by the provincial NDP. So shout outs to our critic or our spokesperson for justice, Emily Chender, who is leading the charge with the support of Gary and the rest of the team. So shout outs to them, doing great work.
Is that our 3 questions? Okay, so I think we have time for we'll take 2 more questions. We'll aim for that. So Charlie's going to motor with the mic and find some people.
So the question I have is kind of like the first one, where the Liberals are being more to the left or more NDP. And unfortunately, their imagery is working because being an immigrant, I deal with the immigrant population. And I am now involved with the NDP, and they ask me why I didn't go with the Liberals. And when I try to explain, they have this misconception that the NDP are against immigration. And I told them it's people who are from the NDP, people that are like the NDP, are the ones who actually fight for people's right. We were the ones who demanded the Syrian refugees be allowed to come in. It's NDP mentality that is open arms and not the others. The others waver as they see fit. So how do we change that?
Let me go.
Is this on? Yeah. I helped out on the last federal election and was dismayed when the red sludge washed over the province. But one of the things I noticed talking to people is this really clever Liberal strategy that they make just enough progressive noises that people feel okay voting for them. And what is the NDP strategy going to be to kind of push back against that complacency?
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think, who want to ask a question? And then I think we'll wrap it for questions there, and then we'll go to our meet and greet, so.
I'm glad you mentioned your activism in your early days on student tuition. because my question has to do with universities in Canada. In 1995, the federal government pulled out of funding of universities in Canada, and they relied on a provincial model for funding for universities. And in some provinces, some universities have done better than universities in other provinces, like universities out west have managed to do well under the provincial funding model. Universities here in Nova Scotia have not done so well. I'm wondering if you feel, because of the provincial funding model that has been adopted here in Nova Scotia, we've seen some tuition increases at some universities for programs increase by as much as 35% over 4 years just recently. And wondering if you feel that the federal government should be back in the support game for universities, and if so, what you feel that would look like.
Thank you. She's in the front row, right here.
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to point out Alexa.
Well, let me do it then. I got to say that we all walk in the footsteps of those who come before us. We stand on their shoulders, and we've got amidst us one of those giants that lifted us all up, and I think without hyperbole is one of the reasons why the party is so strong here in Nova Scotia. Our previous leader, Alexa McDonough, is here in the front row. Can you give her some love? Thank you so much. Also, we've got to say, I mean, a strong woman leader is also a powerful sign of where we need to head, and so that's also a powerful thing, having Alexa here. You know, I'm just going to stand now because I started standing, so me too. Okay, cool. So the first question, Rana, thanks for the question, on the perception. This is something that we faced time and time again. I think it ties into the second question as well. The red sludge, I like that, and suppose the red wave or the tsunami washed over. It's very graphic, that picture that's painted. Thank you for that. I might use it in the future. So on both of these, there's a perception for sure, and there's a number of issues. There's strategic voting that also plays into people's minds, and I think we've got to acknowledge that. That's true. And on the immigration point, let's make it really clear: we need immigration. Immigration is what builds our economy, supports and makes our country more diverse and more beautiful. So immigration we support, and we will always support it, and we have and will continue to. On the question in general, I think we've got to also learn from some of our opponents. And what the Liberals did in the last campaign is they were able to connect with people. I think that's what they were able to do, create this connection. And we can't lose sight of the fact that we might have great policies. In fact, our policies in the last campaign were pretty progressive policies. We talked about farmer care and daycare and lots of great cares. Mall care as well. that was a joke, I think. Like, it was on purpose. It was a cute one, though. I liked it. Booker was great. He's a previous leader as well. We respect him. But there was a lot of great things in our campaign. But I think what we were missing was that connection. There was that at the end of the day, folks felt on a perception level, not necessarily objectively, but subjectively, they felt that maybe the Liberals were more progressive. And when you actually ask people who think that, who felt that way, they can't really point to a specific policy. It's more of a feeling. So that's something we've got to be aware of. In our campaign, we've got to make sure that we don't just talk about great progressive policies, but we also connect with the people we want to vote for us. We've got to tell stories that move people, that make people's hearts beat faster, that get people to dream of what a better Canada would look like, and help envision that and lay out the path to achieving that vision. I think that's one of the big struggles that we have as a smaller party. We've got to really work hard at capturing the imaginations of people. And someone said to me, if you want someone to do something big, you've got to promise something big, and then hopefully deliver on it as well. Not hopefully, definitely. And so the something big, to do something big, is to vote for New Democrats. It's something a lot of people haven't done. So when I ask people to do something big, we've got to make sure we've got a bold, costed, thought-out plan to achieve something big, so that people can really believe in this dream, and we've got to paint it as a dream that we can achieve together. So I think that's a part of what we need to do, and I'm really committed to doing that, using innovative ways of communicating our values, of telling our stories, and really putting people first. This is all about the people, and we're just champions for people. People are the heroes of our story, and we're their champion, always. That'll be the way we do it. I like the fact that you're still overjoyed, that the joy hasn't ended. Thank you. I've been really vocal on this, but I think let's put it out there. Systemic racism exists in Canada. We're a great country. We're a beautiful country, but we've got problems. We've got to admit it. And one of those is the systemic injustice against Indigenous peoples. That's something we've got to name it. We've got to call it out. There was genocide perpetrated against Indigenous peoples. There was also genocidal policies that impacted African Canadians and African Americans. These are real policies that existed. We've got to call them out, and we've got to name the injustice. Slavery is absolutely a crime against humanity. There's no question about it. And we're seeing some evidence of it actually rearing its head again in some nations recently. I believe in Libya, there were some concerns of another potential scenario where this is going to then take hold. So we've got to call it out everywhere in the world. We've got to be champions for human rights. Wherever an injustice occurs, it's our responsibility as human rights defenders to name it and to call it out. And I absolutely support the importance of us naming these injustices. On the specific question, because I don't want to skate, so let me give you a straight answer. On the specific question of reparations, I haven't turned my mind to that or any sort of specific policies on it. So I will now take that back to my team, and we will look at it and see what we can do. So thank you. Thank you. And the tuition fee question, thank you for raising that. I forgot to mention that. Actually, I didn't do an opening remark, so that's probably why I didn't mention it. I like to tell my story. You mentioned 35% increase in the past 4 years. So maybe it's longer than 4 years, but when I went to law school, it wasn't that long ago. I got some grades, but I'm not that old yet. I tell the story that I had some great opportunities in my life. I was really privileged in some ways. I had a lot of difficulties as well. My dad was ill when I was in university, fell very sick, and wasn't able to work anymore. My mom supported him, and so she wasn't working. So times were pretty tough, and no one was earning income. I was the eldest, so it kind of fell on me, and I wanted that responsibility. I felt like it's my job to take care of my parents and my younger brother and sister, so I was really focused on how I could do that. And I started looking at different options. I wanted to get into a profession so that I could have the stability and use education as kind of my tool to get me into a position to support the family. And I looked at different options. And one of my professors suggested law school. And so I looked at it. I had done a science degree. Law was kind of a random jump. But I looked at the cost, the tuition costs, and looked at the potential earning. And it seemed to be a pretty good gamble. So I took a gamble. But at the time, the reason why I was able to make that gamble was that the tuition fee for the law school that I went to was $8,000 a year. And $8,000 a year over 3 years, $24,000 seemed to be something that I could manage. I was able to work for some of the tuition fee. I was able to take out some loans, and our family had some savings, a little bit left. So I managed my way through. But today, guess what the tuition fee for that same law school is? What do you think it is? How much? That's a pretty big jump. So people normally go twice, it maybe doubled in 4 years. It wasn't 4 years ago, but whatever. It might have doubled, right? 16. So 25, higher than 25. Well, that's not 50 yet. It's headed there right now. It's just over $30,000. Just tuition. Per year. Just tuition per year. Just tuition. That means just tuition is $90,000 to go to law school, the law school that I went to. In Canada, I wasn't going to law school. That if you add in books and other expenses that naturally are going to be expenses you have to pay for, it's going to be well over six figures, well over $100,000, well over that. I can tell you without any hesitation that if I was faced with $30,000 tuition fee back when I was the eldest of a family where no one was earning, and I had to be able to get into a position to earn quickly. It was just not even, like, there's no way I could even imagine to afford that. Just not possible. And that means that I wouldn't have become a lawyer, I wouldn't have become an MLA, or the deputy leader of the provincial party, or I wouldn't be standing in front of you today as the leader of a national party. None of that would have happened. And only about me. Imagine how many other young people have so much that they're willing to give back and want to give back to society and are not able to, not because they don't want to, but they can't because they can't afford it. It's not just an injustice to that individual young person. It's actually an injustice to all of us because we miss out on their contribution. And so that's why I don't believe in just funding post-secondary education. I believe in free tuition, no barriers to education for any young people in our country. We can achieve that. It's not unimaginable. I figured at a university that would get a lot of applause. But in all seriousness, the Canadian Federation of Students did some analysis and figured out that roughly between $5 to $7 billion investment could tear down all tuition fees in our country. If you look at our federal budget's well over $300 billion, $350 billion. $7 billion is not so hard to achieve, or not so hard to imagine. That small investment would make a massive difference. Imagine the type of country we would live in where no young person would feel any barrier to pursuing whatever their dreams were, whether it's in arts, in science, in law, in business, in medicine. Imagine that world. That's something we can achieve together.
That was a great way to round it out. I love that. I feel, let's go back to school. Well, let's get in. Let's get school accessible. I'll go back to school.
Yeah.
So,
Do I
my partner's like, no. And what? Sorry, you had a question? Yes, so I'm going to say thank you. So thank you for everyone, to everyone for listening, for engaging, for your thoughtful questions. It goes out to you, number one. Thank you to you, Jagmeet, for your thoughtful and responsible answers. I don't always give responsible answers, so I'm glad that you do. I'm glad that we talked about things that I think really affect us here as a population, our healthcare concerns, things that electoral reform and the ideas of, clearing out the red sludge and bringing in some orange light, maybe. So, I don't know, I'm thinking I'm not a great metaphor person, so. Sunshine, yeah, orange sunshine. Okay, so I'll give the mic to you for your remarks, and then we'll go to a meet and greet. How's that?
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, cool. So first of all, I got to start by saying thank you again to our incredible. You've got a really real and genuine voice, and the way you talk about things, I think it came across. That was really cool. Thank you again to our interpreter. You're doing a great job.
Yes.
I think, is this thank you? Yep. Thank you. And to everyone who organized today's event, it takes a lot of work to organize an event, and this is a pretty incredible turnout. So to all the organizers, all the volunteers, can you give them a big round of applause? They are awesome. Thank you, thank you. I also want to give a special shout out to an incredible arm wrestler and an incredible land recognition. Can you give it up to Trevor Sanipass? Thank you. I'm not worthy. I just want to end with a couple of quick thoughts. I'm standing in front of you as one person, like I'm literally standing by myself, but I'm not by myself. When you look at me, I want you to know that anything that's important, anything that's powerful, anything that's meaningful is never achieved alone. So I'm not here alone. I'm standing here with 44 MPs, with hundreds of staffers, with thousands of volunteers, with all of you, and with people like you across Canada who believe in a better place. So nothing is done alone. It's done with a lot of teamwork. And what I need you all to do is, if you believe that a better future is possible, and if you believe that this is not as good as it gets, that we can dream bigger and we can demand better, then I need you all to get out there and work for this. We need to get there and talk to people about that better future. Get people to start imagining and dreaming about what that's like. We need to raise funds, so definitely help with that. But we also need to excite imagination and inspire people. So get out there and inspire people, have those conversations. That's the only way we can build a better world. Speaking about teammates though, I got one really special teammate that's making a lot of what I do as leader possible. I don't know how many people would think of going on tour, though Vancouver Island is beautiful, but right after getting married, I can't imagine how many people would agree to going on tour as a partner to. But to do that as a honeymoon was probably not what one would imagine. And I did promise her another honeymoon. We'll go on a proper honeymoon as well. I can't imagine someone that would also agree to go on tour, even though the Atlantic provinces are so beautiful, but to go on tour on the day before her birthday. So if I can ask you to join me, her birthday's tomorrow. First, to give a round of applause to my beautiful and incredible and intelligent and passionate and supportive wife, Gurkiran Kaur, who's right in the front row. She's awesome. And she hates attention, actually. She does not like a lot of attention. She likes if I give her a lot of attention, but not if I make everyone. So if we could just really embarrass her with a happy birthday, it would be awesome. So her name is Gurkiran. So happy birthday, Gurkiran. Yeah. Okay, ready? So I suck at singing, but I'm going to do it anyways. You want to sing with me? Ready?
I'm not good either.
Let's do it together. This is the entertainment portion of the evening. Ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Gurkiran. Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
Okay. I might either get in lots of trouble or get lots of love for that, so I'm not sure. It could go either way at this point. But thank you so much. I just want to finish with a line that's become kind of like my closing line, but it really means a lot to me because it really summarizes what I believe in. I think it truly takes an act of love to believe that we are all in this together, and it takes an act of courage to demand better and to dream bigger and fight for that better world. So let's move forward together with love and courage, my friends.